Good evening, beautiful people of planet Earth, and to my Jewish compatriots or fellow members of the Jewish religion. I can't even think of the word. My Jewish congregations out there across all streams of Judaism. Shabbat Shalom. I've just made chicken soup, which is a very Yiddish and mama thing to do. And I've just finished doing that, and I thought I'll sit down and rest and read you stories from Man, Myth and Magic. And I've had a lovely day. It's been a bit rainy and miserable, but they forecast that days ago, and it finally slammed us today. So I couldn't put little Kermie and Bo outside in the sunshine, and they looked a bit depressed about it too. They've got used to me taking them outside each day. And it also meant I couldn't solder down those butterfly embellishments or charms I made for my cuff, because I like to do the soldering when they're outside so they're not exposed to the soldering fumes. And because I don't have a fume extractor, and it's more money that I probably need to invest in, but I'll work around it. But so yeah, no soldering happened today, but almost, but not quite. My stainless steel trolley arrived that I ordered from Vivo about a week or so ago. I've been sweating on it arriving, but anyway, it didn't take all that long. And I was so excited. I saw the delivery man driving off up the road. They're having trouble finding my address. It's ridiculous. The GPS throws all the numbers in all sorts of weird disarray. So I saw him and I knew it was for me because they had messaged me in the morning that my parcel was coming. So I ran outside and I waved him down. He was so relieved and happy that I did that, I think. It was quite heavy. So then I set to work. This was about 1:37 p.m. So then I set to work, brought it inside and laid it out, and opened up the packaging and pulled out all the bolts and screws. And for a moment I had a panic attack because on the diagram it looked like I was missing bolts and screws, but then I realised they were the actual legs of the table, but they'd just done them in tiny little shapes so they looked just like bolts. And oh, please God, there'd be nothing missing. Actually, it was very good. They actually even supplied an extra bolt and screw just in case you lose one, which I was very happy about, actually. I thought that was excellent. So then I set that up, put that together and set it up, and set up my soldering station with all my soldering equipment. On one side, the Lazy Susan, I made it out of an old second-hand but new rock, and I made I didn't have the pumice stone, which is expensive to buy, so I smashed up lava rock that I had from when I had my fish ponds. I use it to filter my pond filters, so I smashed that up. So I put that on one side, and the pickling station, you pickle everything when you solder and melt things, on the right hand side. I took a photo of it, put it up on Instagram, and I'm very excited. And then on the shelf underneath I put all my extra soldering boards and my I don't know what you call it. Oh yeah, my crucible handle and my Delft clay. So I've got the whole lot, all kit and caboodle in one place. However, it still takes up a fair bit of space in my little studio, so it feels a bit cluttered in there now. But I've got more room on my bench, so I was able to put things back how I like that, and then rearrange all my step cabinet and spread things out so it's not all so cluttered in there. And so the space I lost with the soldering station with the stainless steel trolley, gained space in other areas. So it's going to work, I think. The birdies weren't all real impressed. They're looking at this table as if to say, what the hell is this impeding on our limited space? But I guess if it gets annoying or becomes a problem, because it's a trolley, I can just wheel it into, the other bedroom when I'm not using it or don't intend to use it for a while. And although that bedroom's chockers full too, but I'll create space somehow. How, I don't know. It's a tiny house. It's a tiny 3-bedroom post-war cottage, but I've got it all. I've got it all going on, baby. It's kind of funny. I could create space by selling my mother's. Well, it's mine, I inherited it, but selling the Lardro that once belonged to my mother, and selling that ugly bloody cabinet and get rid of all that stuff. Then I'd have a little bit more space, but I don't know. They won't give me the money for the Lardro. They'll give you nothing for it, and it's I just for some reason hold on to it quite sentimentally. I don't even know why, because I don't even really look at it that much. I guess because I fought so hard for it. It's a matter of principle now. But yes, if I sold that, I'd probably get $2,000 or $3,000, and that could go towards my silversmithing. So I might think about that. Maybe not. I always think about it, and it just drifts through my mind. I'm like, I can't really be bothered. It's been with me since it was my job to wash and polish the Lardro in the 1970s and early 80s when she bought the big lady with the dare. So, and I was always terrified of breaking it because they were very valuable back in the day. And it was kind of my mother's way of torturing me in a sense. Don't you break that expensive Spanish porcelain. Don't you break the Lardro. Oh, she was a psychopath. But anyway. It's not broken, but now it lies around like a white elephant. How many years later? Since she bought the first one when we lived in Melbourne with Case. 1974 she bought the first one. Yes, the first one was the lady with the dare. And then when I went to visit my father in Ipswich in 1981, she bought the dressage lady riding the horse. And that was a pain in my ass because Dad lived in a caravan park that was quite rough and ready, and it was extremely hot, and I was terrified, absolutely terrified of someone smashing it or it getting damaged. Kind of was a big responsibility on my month-long holiday with my father. Spent most of it worrying about my mother's bloody china. But she must have bought it duty-free, and that's why I had custody of it for the month and had to bring it back into New Zealand with me. That's what would have happened. Anyway, so why am I going on about that? Oh yes, because I'm trying to think how I can create more space in my little bird bedroom and or studio and or library and or knick-knack collection in there. That room serves several purposes actually. It's quite lovely. So I put up photos of how I'd rearranged things. I don't know if anyone's really all that interested in it, but I look back on them sometimes and go, oh yeah, that was good, that was progress. I can see how you're progressing, Tanya, and I take quite a bit of pride in my own creativity and improving my studio as best as I could. I actually need a proper studio, like probably the size of 2 or 3 bedrooms, of my size small bedrooms. Spread everything out and have room to move, but I guess I could rent a space if I was actually making enough jewellery and making money, but I'm not, and that would be expensive too. But it must be wonderful to have a studio where you can have everything, all the soldering station on one side. And I've seen some of the jewellers on the Women's Metalsmith Collective post their studios, and some of them are quite marvellous, but they obviously have husbands that could afford to buy them large homes and have large spaces, or or some of them rent studios and proper studios, like larger studios. But then on the other hand, I've seen people making the most wonderful things out of tiny back of a gypsy caravan with less space than I have in my room. So where there's a will, there's a way. But, you know, I've got my tree stump that I use for stamping and, you know, doing the shop plates tucked away in the laundry, because there was no room for that. I thought there was no room for that, but I made room for the soldering station, did I not? So it just shows you, goes to show what you prioritise as to what you fit into a room. But it would be nice to have it all in one space, is what I'm saying, all together. So I can on any given day go, today I'll stamp something, go over to the tree stump and hammer away, and today I'll solder and go over to my soldering station. Today I'll sit at my bench and saw things out and make things. So yeah, it's a lot of fun for me. It's a lot of work. It is a lot of work, and I'm not exactly producing much. My hands get very sore with my arthritis, so who knows how long I'll be able to keep doing it. Maybe in a few years I'll be selling everything off because it'll get too much for me. You just don't know. But in the meantime, I'm buying tools and equipment as if I have an actual business, because I'm manifesting and getting what I need, so that when I make things, I'm not feeling frustrated that, you know, things aren't how I want them and I'm not comfortable with it. It's hard to create when you feel hemmed in and you're missing half the things you need, and it's frustrating, and I don't like working under frustrating circumstances, and I like to work at my own pace and have that freedom too. So getting hot in here, had the heater on in here. Whew, turn it off, by the gods. Right, so let us continue, my beautiful people of planet Earth and all other interdimensional entities of love, light, truth, peace, joy, prosperity, abundance, thriving, goodness, kindness, compassion, and mercy upon us all, us humanoids, us earthlings. I've been watching some very disturbing videos about we're on the brink, or we actually are kind of already in an economic war with China, and then another one about Donald Trump, and honestly it's enough to make me feel paranoid and frightened. But of course a lot of these videos pop up on the internet for that very reason, to keep you feeling fearful and on edge. So I watch it and then I think, you know, all the things I worried about when I was young that I thought would happen, like nuclear holocaust, and was terrified in the 90s of catching AIDS, which was weird because I was married. But, you know, there was all that terrible HIV scare, which was a serious thing if you happened to be gay or IV user. It was very, very serious and very terrifying. But, you know, what I'm saying here is all the things that I thought would be life-threatening and awful and pestilential and dangerous, including the COVID epok, never really manifested, and we were just fed fear and terror and draconian rules and mandates, just kept us in a state of horror and fear. So, the acronym of fear is face everything and rise, people of Earth. And I've got to overcome my fear that I'll never find a loving partner, because that's irrational too, even though I'm older now. Could happen one day. And I've got to overcome my fear of failure, which I'm pushing hard against by buying, for example, that little table to work on and equipment that I need for my silversmithing. And what was the other thing? Overcome my fear of poverty and just keep working through day by day, moment by moment, until I push through that membrane that separates me from all my dreams coming true, or alternatively all my fears finally crashing down upon me and utterly destroying me, that I call the abyss. Well, babies, Tanya has climbed out of more abysses than the average human, coming from my background of abuse in my childhood and in my young adulthood, and after I left my husband in my 30s and 40s, right up to age 50 when I attempted suicide. That was the ultimate abyss. Did not expect to come back from that, to be honest. So all the little button pushers and sadists and arseholes that still float around like vermin on the periphery of my life, be on notice. You've all failed one way or the other to destroy me. And why is that? Because love is the law, and love underwill them. The gods have my back. Not because I'm a better person or a nicer person or a kinder person. I can be an asshole at times too. Put in survival mode, which some of you tried to put me into, which wasn't nice. But for some peculiar reason, I was not allowed to die 16 times up until 13th of February this year. So it's not to say I can't die. Of course I can. Everyone dies eventually. But it's just that it's a bit astonishing how someone with a capital S is determined to keep me alive on this planet, number one, and number two, to see me succeed and thrive, even if it means, of course, that I stay on my own for the rest of my life. I've already done that for 30 years, so it's not so bad. But they're determined. That energy, whoever they are, whether angel, God or demon, I actually don't know, to be honest. But that entity, that energy is absolutely determined that I succeed under my own merits and my own undertakings, and prove not just to other people but to my own self that I'm capable of great things. What's the great thing I'm capable of? Surviving against all the odds. So far that's all I've been able to prove to myself, and sometimes I couldn't even tell you how I did it. It was really that much of a miracle or a fluke. So I don't take it, glibly or lightly that I'm here alive in this moment talking to you about these real lived experiences. So it's astonishing even to my own mind at times. And bear in mind, I had enormous support over many years from good, kind, noble and courageous people, including my psychiatrist, who stood by me 14 and a half years. So he saw me at my very worst when I came to him in 2010. I was an absolute blithering mess after my mother's death. And he's seen me rise up and take the reins back in my chariot of life and regain equilibrium of some measure and grow and turn myself into still very much an intermediate stage silversmith with lots to learn. Like I still need to learn how to make cages to set stones and all that kind. There's a lot I still have to learn. But I'm getting there slowly, people of Earth, at my own pace and my own time, at my own expense, without any assistance from, anyone, any government agency like the NDIS or anyone helping me with a mature age apprenticeship or anything that would have been really useful. I'm doing this on my own. Of course, it takes me a lot longer to achieve things on my own, but I'm okay with it. It's not as much pressure apart from the pressure I put on myself, which is immense at times. But as I said the other day, if I was in an apprenticeship, all that silver I had to melt down because I stuffed up, that they would have fired me. So it's good that I learn at my own pace and my own expense and my own limited fundage. Right, so let us continue reading from Man, Myth and Magic, Volume 1. We're up to page 73 if you have a copy and you want to read along with me. And we're going to read Black Magic and Witchcraft. What are the methods of black magic? Is there a difference between a black magician and a witch, or between black magic and white? This introductory article sets the scene for later, more detailed entries. Might just move my cup over there. So I'm eating salt vinegar chips, which is very easy. I'm craving for snacky, salty things. I just had an early dinner or a late lunch at 4 o'clock and I'm still hungry, so. Magic attempts to make use of mysterious forces which most people cannot control or do not believe in. A black magician is one who does this for evil purposes. His operations may vary from things as trivial as afflicting someone he dislikes with lice, as in the case of a Suffolk witch named Alicia Warner, who confessed in 1645 that she had sent evil spirits to carry lice to 2 women, and the court found that the said women were lousy according as she confessed, to much more serious crimes, blighting crops or cattle, or committing rape or murder, like the Celtic poet magicians, who were said to rhyme their victims to death by declaring literally blistering satires against them. In verses which caused black, red and white blotches to erupt on the skin, followed sooner or later by death. Sounds nasty, doesn't it? Up to the ultimate aim of the master black magician, which is to wield supreme power over the entire universe, to make himself God. Don't try that at home, folks. Just saying. I shouldn't laugh because there are idiots that actually think they can do that, but it invariably backfires on them. But then we could ask Dr. Fauci and that other monster, Bill Gates. How playing God with the multinational populations has worked out for them remarkably well in their case. Monsters that they are. Right. Power is the black magician's guiding light. It is the hope of obtaining limitless power which spurs him on, and the exercise of power which he enjoys. He exalts dominance, cruelty, hatred, lust, all fierce and hard emotions. He scorns kindness, humility, sympathy, and self-sacrifice. He often takes a double-edged attitude to his own activities, convincing himself that his intention to kill or terrify is the highest good, while simultaneously wriggling with glee at his own delicious evilness. Black magicians exist today as in the past, but they are few and far between. I beg to differ. There's quite a few out there hiding in plain sight. I can name some of them, but I won't, because apart from those two obvious ones, you risk defamation. But there's quite a few of them out there, people of Earth. But face everything and rise, babies. The number of people so dedicated to the total reversal of the accepted rules of the society they live in that they consistently practice evil magic is, and always has been, very small. It's human reluctance to believe in a universe so disorderly and so out of sympathy with man that important events may occur by mere chance has caused all sorts of misfortunes, deaths, illnesses, and accidents to be put down to hostile magic. And so the term black magic includes both the practices of a limited number of real sorcerers and the much wider field of illusory practices and powers attributed to non-existent ones. He's carefully hedging his bets there. That's all I have to say about that. Anyway, again, remember this book was written in 1970. It was kind of the beginning of the resurgence of witchcraft and Wicca and other, satanic cults all suddenly came back into vogue again from 1970 on. I know my mother had a copy of the Satanic Bible in the house and a few other quite dark kind of texts, which kind of alarmed my young friend down the road. I said to her, my mother just likes to read things out of studying the occult. She's not actually a practitioner. Little did I know. She put spells on me, that's for sure. But anyway, having said that, the 1970s by and large were sweeter, more innocent times. But we've devolved since then. Just look around you at the politics and the wars going on and who's in charge of America, or China wanting to start a war with us over trade sanctions, which kind of understandable in a way. I can see both sides of that argument. But anyway, what was I saying? the state of the world. It's a spiritual war we're indulged in now more than ever before, and I'm very, very conscious of that. I was conscious of it 10 years ago, but when COVID came, that just cemented the deal. I realised this is beyond politics and health. This is spiritual warfare. Right, now, picture above that I'm going to show you may be distressing to some of you, so trigger warning. It's clearly showing some kind of human sacrifice or a bloodletting about to be taking place. I'll read the blurb and then I'll show you the photo, but those of you that don't want to see anything horrific, time to go make a nice cup of tea. Think lovely thoughts, my darlings. In a modern witch ceremony, the high priestess breathes power along an umbilical cord, which is shown here as a piece of rope between her teeth, into a wine chalice, which will then be fertilized by the male phallic knives. So it's just symbolic, is what they're saying. They're not actually going to cut into her, but it kind of looks like that. She's lying on a very expensive Axminster carpet, and there's all these knives poked at her. I assumed the worst, people of Earth. The wine will be shared by the witches at a ritual feast. And I'll show you these pictures again before I continue reading. Above, consecrating oil at a witch's altar on the Yorkshire moors. The oil, a descendant of the flying ointment of the Middle Ages, is used today to protect the body against cold during outdoor ceremonies. Show you that top one first. Male witch consecrating the oil. And below left, modern ritual magician at his altar. And below right, modern witches with the paraphernalia of their art. Horns, wand, candle, cord, scourges, censer, pentacle. Similar equipment is used by both magicians and witches, but where the magician seeks to dominate supernatural forces, witches worship them. And far right, both black magicians and witches traditionally are in league with demonic powers. The demon of ingenious discoveries and inventions, Belphegor, from Colin de Plancy's Dictionnaire Infernal. Right, so here's the modern ritual magician at the altar. Not sure why he's wearing a mask, but that's how he's adorned himself. And the other couple here with all their paraphernalia surrounding them. And here we have Belphegor. holding on to his own tail, which I find vaguely amusing. But anyway, the left-hand path. Both in fact and in popular belief, black magic is intensely antisocial, rejecting all accepted values and proclaiming their opposites. This is why it is connected with things that are inverted, upside down, or the wrong way round. In the Ozark Hill Country in the United States, the ceremony of initiating a witch ends with the recitation of the Lord's Prayer. Backwards. That's my chippies. Can't be using my chippies, people are there. Might have lost my ring once, but I got it back and we won't be losing the chips. It's when the chips are down, Mama T rises up. In southern France in 1932, an American writer, W.B. Seabrook, found a witch doll, pierced with pins and smeared with toad's blood, intended to kill the person it represented. Near it, resting on a Bible, was an inverted crucifix on which a toad had been crucified, head downwards. Today, California hippies who dabble in Satanism wear inverted crosses. Black magic is called the left-hand path because right-handedness is normal and left-handedness is reversal of the normal. Unless you happen to be born with, being left-handed, in which case you're the normal one and everyone else is weird. But, people who were left-handed even 100 years ago were severely punished in schools and smacked and forced to write with their right hand. It was really quite cruel. Anyway, he didn't understand. It was just a matter of brain wiring and genetics and what have you. Witches were accused of dancing widdershins, which is counterclockwise, to the left at their meetings. And the principal charge against witches in Europe was that they had leagued themselves with the devil, the arch enemy of God and man, the rebel against divine order, which is kind of ironic since Lucifer actually was an ancient Roman god and represents phosphor, which is a bright blinding light that represents enlightenment and knowledge and empowerment and education and epiphanies and sudden blinding flashes of inspiration, all quite wonderful things, but is demonized yet again by a certain religion we won't mention because every time I think about it, it grinds my gears. And I don't wish to offend members of that religion. I too once belonged to it as a child. Didn't help me much with the homegrown pedophiles, did it? Suffered the little children to come unto me. Indeed. That's why Davidson drew my ire, telling me to come to him and submit, thinking that was seductive and sexy, not realising it's to me a red flag and a trigger of pending abuse, which I happen to be right about actually. He went on to attempt to strangle me. Well, not just attempt, did a bloody good show of it. But anyway, where was I? Try not to think about the motherfuckers that have been in and out of my life since early infancy. Christian, Jewish, non-affiliated, made no difference. Right, the same connection between the black magic and the reversal of accepted values appears outside the European tradition. Navajo Indians say that to obtain his power, a black magician must murder one of his younger brothers or sisters. That's nice. Not. In the Congo, the Logo and Kaliko people say that witches walk about upside down. The night dancing witches of the Kaguru in Tanganyika go about naked, walk on their hands, and turn their black skins white with ashes. Excuse me. Oh, chicken's got stuck there. Black magicians, real or alleged, are sexually perverse and they love dirt. See, these are just kind of assumptions and generalizations, aren't they? You'd be surprised how pristine a black magician can actually be, and hiding in plain sight in polite society. Not at all dirty and not at all sexually perverse, although some of them probably are, in their private lives that you don't see. But anyway, these are just all, as I say, generalisations that goes along with the archaic misogynistic language of the various authors in this encyclopedia, which is starting to grind my gears, but you can't cover everything with wokeism and politically correct language. You just have to go with the flow, I guess, people of Earth. Go with the fucking flow. In Africa, the Azande associate lesbianism and witchcraft together. Interesting. The Mandari of the Sudan say that wizards practice homosexuality, bestiality with cows and goats, and intercourse with immature girls. Filthy habits like urinating in drinking vessels are taken as indications that a person is probably a witch. I'm trying to think why you would urinate in a drinking vessel. I guess if there was nowhere to go, like if there was a fire in the club and you were told to wait outside and you couldn't wait any longer, but there was nowhere to pee except in the street, and I wasn't going to do that. But I get why someone might, especially a male, pee into a glass or something, in an urgent situation, urgently needing to pee. I don't think that necessarily makes them a witch, though. See what I mean? It's all a bit of a stretch, quite frankly. Excuse the pun. Dear goddess. In Europe, witches were accused of committing every conceivable sexual perversion with each other and with demons. And the words filthy, lewd, unnatural appear constantly in descriptions of their behaviour. Aleister Crowley, a notorious modern black magician, performed perverse rituals with male and female partners and took a marked interest in human excrement. Ooh, but did he really though? Or was that just hearsay? I mean, was anyone actually there when he was doing that? I mean, we all know that he was a bit of a sexual entrepreneur. Put it delicately there, but the human excrement thing, Don't know about that. Incest and cannibalism are commonly associated with black magic. I agree with that, absolutely. And so are unnatural relationships with animals. I agree with that too. European witches were said to keep familiar spirits in animal form which sucked their blood, like Jane Bussey of Kent, accused in 1583 of keeping 3 imps, Pygene resembling a mole, Russell resembling a grey cat, and the other called Dunsot resembling a dun dog, with intent that she might enchant and bewitch as well men as beasts and other things. Or she might have just had a cat and a dog and a mole as pets. Like, it's not necessarily black magic, people of Earth. I've had many pets throughout my lifetime, although I've never kept a mole. Then I don't live in England, do I? We did have kind of wild pets of hedgehogs when I was a child in our garden, in our house in New Zealand. My dad and I used to put out sources of milk for them. They weren't technically pets, you understand, because they were wild and they would drink the milk and then scuttle off back into the undergrowth. Right, the methods of black magic. The black magician's armoury is as various as his purposes. He may use his own inner powers, spirits, demons or forces outside himself, mimicry, words and gestures, weapons like the magic wand or circle, and medicine. Evil medicines can be herbs or plants, roots, parts of the bodies of animals or human beings, pieces of paper with words or symbols written on them, knots tied in string, stones, or almost anything else. Whether they are actually harmful, like snake venom, or outwardly harmless, but having sinister associations, like bat's blood, they are not usually expected to work by themselves. There must be a link between the charm and the victim. His nail clippings or hair, clothes he has worn, or bedding he has slept in, are believed to retain a connection with him, so that what is done to them is done to him. Less tangible things, a man's name or his shadow or his footprint, are also linked with him and can be used against him. An 18th century French magical textbook, the Grimorium Verum, says that you can harm an enemy by driving into his footprint a nail from an old coffin. So, Pater Noster Auctu in Terra, which seems intended to mean Our Father which art on earth, parodying the Lord's Prayer and appealing to the devil. You hammer the nail in with a stone and say, cause harm to so and so until I remove you. If there is no natural link with the victim, the magician must create one. He may bury an evil charm in the path where his victim will walk over it, or he may hide it in his enemy's house. When the German general Germanicus died in 19 AD, when the Roman general Germanicus died in 19 AD, my eyes must have read ahead slightly, a few seconds ahead. Under the floor and behind the walls of his room were found human bones, rotting bits of dead bodies and pieces of lead, the metal of death, with his name written on them. Wow, someone was serious, weren't they? Another way to create a link is simply to state in words that one exists. The witches of North Berwick tried to kill James VI of Scotland by making a doll to represent him and roasting it in a fire. But first they passed it from hand to hand, saying, "This is King James VI." Before I continue, I'll just show you the picture above. The Witches' Sabbath by Goya. Witches were believed to hold orgiastic revels at which their god appeared to them, sometimes in human form, sometimes in the form of an animal, frequently a goat. Always got it in for the bloody goats, haven't they? I laughed my arse off. I still laugh to this day when I think about it. My friend Jared took me, or I took him, we wanted to see it because we like horror movies, especially about witchcraft. So we went to see Drag Me to Hell. Everyone in the cinema was utterly terrified and transfixed and holding their breath when it got to the part where the goat started talking, mind you, in perfect English. And I think it was spoken English anyway. And all I could think of was the biblical story about Balaam, who was told to curse some man, and instead the donkey opened its mouth and blessed the man. And anyway, I just saw the funny side of it. I don't know why. So I burst into hysterical laughter. And by the way, when I'm hysterically laughing, I cackle like a witch. It's actually I have a distinctive laugh, like I'm infamous for my laugh. There's people that go, Tanya Aarons is here, I can hear her laughing. I have a distinctive laugh, which you heard that little bit of a chortle, but this was full-throttled, hysterical laughter because it was just so funny. And I was a bit triggered by that movie because the storyline of that movie is this old gypsy witch gets angry with a bank, wouldn't let her withdraw money or something, so this unleashes a whole litany of demonic infestations and evil in the town, and it's all because they wouldn't treat her like a normal human being. I kind of got it because I had recently in that time frame been othered by the Commonwealth Bank, which ironically I'm still bank with, but they were so awful to me. They actually gave me money to shut me up, $325. I said to her, have you ever heard of a bank paying you to shut up about what bastards they were? Didn't work because I still speak out, don't I? But they gave me compensation for utterly degrading and humiliating me. So anyway, I'm watching this movie and all I can think of is how I align with the Romanian gypsy witch there, being furious that she'd been treated so evilly. So the whole movie kind of made sense to me. I'd be like, I was sitting there like, yeah, I'd do that. Yeah, they deserve that. And then something else would happen. I'd be like, oh, that's maybe a bridge too far, but I kind of get, I can get the rage and how it all kind of unraveled. And then Jared's looking at every now and Jared would look at me and go, you do that, Tanya? And I'm like, I know, I'm completely resonating with the old lady. I wasn't old then. This was quite some years ago, probably 15 or 20 years ago. When did that movie come out? I can't even remember. Let's Google it. But anyway, it was it was just, when I got to the part where the donkey starts talking and everyone's freaking the fuck out. The whole movie just to me felt like a comedy. I just found it hilarious. So I was laughing at everything. Everyone else was terrified, and I'm like, what's wrong with people? Haven't they heard of these things? Because I forget. I've studied the occult all my life, so I've heard it. Either heard or experienced or read about or witnessed or observed or, many of these things. So nothing much really phases me. And the ordinary muggles, which is a term made up by J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter, who've never been exposed to anything like that, get really terrified of just the most ordinary things. And I'm like, what the hell is wrong with you people? But anyway, right, so it came out in 2009. So what's that? 2010, 16 years ago. So I was close. Anyway, I can't say it's an excellent movie because it wasn't meant to be a comedy, but I found everything hilarious. It's not one of my most riveting horror movies I've ever seen. That were genuinely terrifying. But yeah, the thing about the goat, they always make the goat the bad guy. And goats are actually very sweet people, They're very lovely. They make lovely pets. Unless you have billy goats. They try to hump everything that moves and they can be a bit of a pest, but if you have female goats, it can be quite sweet. Anyway, where was I? Right, we continue with the story, people of Earth. Language is one of the great magical weapons because of the belief that words, infused with the power of the magician's will, make what is stated in the words happen. Cause harm to so-and-so until I remove you. In some societies, as among the Maori in New Zealand, the words which make a particular spell work must never be altered. The correct words are handed down from magician to magician, for the words themselves have magical force. Language and oration in amongst the Maori peoples, they're famous for their oration, and words and how they express themselves are deeply, deeply treasured and cherished and powerful. Even watching the local member of, not the local member of Parliament, but the young member of Parliament fighting against some legislation they were trying to push through that they didn't like. I can't remember, it was something to do with the treaty, I think. Watching that young woman stand there in full power and pride and speak out against it in her own Maori language takes the breath away. There's nothing like seeing a Maori warrior fighting for their people with their words. The mana and the soul expression is just so nourishing to watch. Terrifying to the uninitiated, but for me, inspiring and so nourishing. I actually wrote a comment, it was on Instagram, it said, I'm so proud of you today, and I'm a Pakeha white woman living in Australia for many years, but you did us all proud. And I really was impressed with that young woman. Pity there aren't more politicians like her that have the courage of their convictions to stand by their own humanity and their own people. Mama T has spoken. The correct words are handed down from magician to magician, for the words themselves have magical force. But more often a magician is free to vary his incantations. and he experiments with them until he finds those which seem to work best. The link with the victim, like the electric wiring in a house, is the channel through which the spell hits its target. To make the spell effective, a black charge of energy must be propelled through the link, and this energy comes from the magician himself, or from forces outside him. So he's merely a channel, in shamanism we call it the hollow bow, channeling external forces of power and magic through your body, mind, spirit, and then externalizing it out to usually someone you're healing, but occasionally someone you might be cursing to, because it does not behoove one to piss off a shaman and do harm to one who has that initiatory experiences or lineage or life path. Just saying. She smells sweetly. But God knows people do keep trying, don't they? Probably just to test me. Mama T's a very wonderful, loving, kind, sweet person. But when she goes to war, it's always for very noble, life-affirming, humanitarian reasons, and the gods are always on my side in that case. Right. Bear in mind, I keep myself pretty much on the edges of society, apart from my one night. Nights when I go out dancing is the only time I really mingle in large groups. I do my own thing in my own time frames. Try and live my best life at all times, with harm to none and competition with none. And keep myself clean and clear, and try to, live a good and healthy and noble life. But someone tries to damage me for no good reason, but they think they can. It's not wise. Not wise. Been through too much, too many times, with too many other monsters. Ad nauseum. Over and over and over again. So there is that. Right, where do we go from here, my darlings? Through mimicry, words and gestures, the magician works up his own inner fury or hatred or lust to a frenzied pitch, and through them he externalizes his frenzy and directs it at his target. The sorcerers of the Central Pacific Islands list all the parts and organs of the victim's body, saying over and over again in a torrent of rage, I break, I twist, I burn, I destroy. This is called sympathetic magic, people of Earth. When a bone or a stick is pointed at a man to kill him, the magician jabs it in the air with an expression of violent hatred and turns and twists it as if in the wound. In the same way, a European black magician acts out hatred for his victim, stabbing the air with a sword or a knife, and whipping or wounding an animal or another human being, filling his mind with images of blood and pain, and working himself into a state of frenzy in which, he believes, he draws into himself all the forces of violence and destruction in the universe. He becomes these forces, he masters them, and he launches them against his enemy with scarifying force. Don't try that at home, people of Earth, unless you know exactly what you're doing. Very, very dangerous practices indeed, because they can blow back on you quite severely too. Black magicians and modern witches in Europe frequently work inside a circle, which is both a barrier against evil forces and an enclosure in which the magician's power can be built up and concentrated. They also use great quantities of symbolic paraphernalia, which bring the magician power, with which he gives effect to his will. When he stabs in mimicry with the sword, he pierces his enemy with agony. When he strikes with the scourge, he flails his enemy's flesh. To what extent a magician's magical power comes from inside himself or from outside is a matter which magicians themselves are often vague about. They are frequently believed to be able to harm a victim by concentrated malice alone, by ill-wishing him. For instance, a Suffolk witch, Elizabeth Hobart, was said to have wished her cousin Hobart harm, and he fell lame and so continued till he died. But usually they also claim to evoke and use forces from outside themselves. The European magical textbooks are mainly concerned with rituals for summoning up spirits and demons which will obey the magician's orders. Again, be very careful before you dabble in that, people of Earth. They're real energies that you're calling upon, and you can't control them. You think you can, out of narcissism or arrogance or pride, but they are forces beyond mortal care. Quiché Indians in Guatemala say that a man who wants to become a witch sleeps in a cemetery for 9 nights and prays to the devil, from whom he can obtain power. In Africa, the Nyoro black magicians send evil spirits to attack people, and the Lili sorcerers force the spirits of dead babies to foretell the future. When magic works as it sometimes does, it usually appears to be explicable in terms of its effects on the minds of the magician and his victim, without any necessity to assume the presence of mysterious outside forces. A black magician of dominating personality can have a terrifying effect, even on the skeptically inclined. And when a sorcerer puts a fatal spell on a man who believes in his power, It is not unknown for the victim to fade away and die. But it is probably the belief which kills him, not the spell. In European ritual magic, a small group of magicians perform a long and exhausting ceremony in which they attempt to conjure up to visible appearance a spirit or demon or occult power of some kind. During the ceremony, they gradually whip themselves up into a state of intense excitement. They have a clear mental picture of the demon they expect to see, and often a drawing or painting of it. It is not very surprising if, at the climax of the ceremony, they actually see it, but the demon seems more likely to be a creation of their own minds than something existing independently. Black magician and witch. Some anthropologists studying African beliefs have drawn a rough distinction between a sorcerer and a witch. A sorcerer uses medicine, plants, roots, nails, hair, and the rest. A witch, on the other hand, possesses inner magical power and can injure a person by concentrating malice upon him. Anyone who takes the time and trouble can become a sorcerer, but not everyone has the innate power of a witch. This distinction is not always clear in practice and is not accepted as generally true by all anthropologists. Certainly it does not fit the European tradition in which both black magicians and witches are credited with innate power and both use noxious substances and potions. In Europe, the distinction between them is based on the difference in their characteristic attitudes to the forces with which they deal. Broadly speaking, the black magician seeks to dominate and control occult powers, while the witch worships them. This is reflected in the fact that the majority of European black magicians have been men, and the majority of witches women. For it is an old tradition that men are essentially dominant and women subordinate. They wish. Just saying. According to the accusations made against them in the time of the persecutions, witches worshipped the devil. They met at their Sabbaths to pay homage to Satan, expressing their subjection to him by kissing his backside. It was he who taught them how to work evil magic and gave them their familiar imps. He who whipped them if they were disobedient. He who led their orgies. He was their master and their God. Modern witches have continued the tradition of the witch as a worshipper. They worship cosmic forces which they see personified in the gods of pagan, pre-Christian Europe. They believe that their predecessors were misunderstood and misrepresented by Christian persecutors, and they claim to practice white magic, not black. Black magic and white. The distinction between black and white magic is simple enough in theory. A black magician works for evil ends and a white magician for good. But in practice the distinction is frequently blurred. For one thing, it rests in the eyes of the beholder, and very often white magic is what you work, and black magic is what other people work. For another, a man who believes he has magical powers is likely, being human, to use them sometimes to help and sometimes to harm. Among North American Indians, the medicine man who can cure a disease can also inflict it. A Papago Indian recalled a year in which we lynched a medicine man. He had been killing people. Similarly, modern witches and white magicians will usually admit their readiness to turn their powers against rival occultists who attack them. Indeed. For magicians themselves, magic is morally neutral. It works automatically, like a tap. If you turn the taps on in the bath, you get water. You may be filling the bath to wash the baby or to drown him, but your motives do not affect the water supply. It's a very important distinction there. It's the intention and where you place your energy that makes it black or white magic. The most startling thing about the European grimoires or magical textbooks is their use of fervent and sincere prayers to God, asking his help in operations intended to kill people, to cause pain, or to stir up hatred. One example from many is the long process in the grimoire of Honorius, dating from the 17th century or earlier. It purports to have been written by a pope, and the magician who uses it should be a priest. It involves the slaughter of a lamb, which is ritually identified with Christ as the Lamb of God, and it bristles with impassioned appeals to God and solemn sayings of Mass. But its purpose is to summon the devil. The authors of the grimoires inherited an old magical tradition that the power of a god can be captured and turned on like a tap, regardless of the magician's motives. They also inherited a deeper tradition still, that the true goal of the magician is to find and identify himself with an ultimate unity, underlying and pervading all things. Think about that carefully, people on earth. All things are grist to the magician's mill, and all experiences are necessary to him. He must experience and master hatred as well as love, cruelty as well as mercy, evil as well as good. This is the path of the magus, and it is the magus perverted who makes the master black magician. Right, the next entry is altar. The altar is usually the most sacred part of any church or temple. It has a double origin as the platform or table on which offerings to a deity were placed, but also sometimes as the throne or home of the deity itself. From the dawn of human culture, there is evidence that man was moved to make offerings, probably of a sacrificial kind, to supernatural powers. Even the subhuman precursor of mankind, I doubt they were subhuman, had burial rites and understood about the stars, but anyway, we'll just find that offensive actually. But anyway, we'll continue on with their reality that is not reality at all, shows complete ignorance. Neanderthal man about 100,000 BC seems to have practiced a cult which involved the sacrifice of bears. In caves, for example, at Drachenloch, Switzerland, the Petershöhle near Nuremberg, bear skulls have been found carefully arranged in niches and on stone slabs, which the prehistorian J. Maringer has described as the oldest altars of sacrifice so far known. But this interpretation of problematic material of such remote antiquity must necessarily be treated with reserve. More certain is the later evidence from about 6000 BC at Kartal Höyük in Turkey, where a shrine was used for fertility rites associated with a mother goddess and a bull cult. A low mud brick platform formed a kind of table before a wall adorned with representations of bulls' heads, women's breasts, and human hands. Human skulls were on the altar. These prehistoric examples indicate that from very early times, places have been specially used or constructed for the purpose of offering sacrifice. The need to show that the offerings were specifically presented to supernatural beings doubtless caused the altar to be raised above ground level, thus suggesting the idea of a table of the gods, though this analogy must not be pressed too far. The words for altar in Semitic languages merely indicate a place where a victim was slaughtered, while in some Indo-European languages the terms used denote a place where a sacrifice was burned. Their association with deity gave altars an aura of holiness, and the altar could even be regarded as the throne of a deity. Altars and sacrifice. Altars are frequently represented in ancient Egyptian art, and the remains of some still survive in temples. It would seem that the Egyptians regarded altars only as necessary adjuncts to ritual worship. Their altars generally appear to have been light tables holding food and jars. Temple altars could be large stone erections with steps, such as the sun altar in the temple of Hatshepsut in Deir al-Bahiri. Hatshepsut, yes. Tall stands containing fire served for burnt offerings. In ancient Mesopotamia, two types of altar generally seem to have been used: large structures of brick for burnt offerings, and small altars of various shapes for burning incense. Altars figured prominently in ancient Jewish worship. Significant examples of early practice occur in Genesis. In chapter 8, Noah builds an altar and offers burnt offerings, and God smelled the pleasing odour, which apparently God really likes, the smell of burnt animal sacrifices. The God of the Old Testament, that is. Who was that God really? We don't know. Chapter 22 describes how Abraham built an altar for the sacrifice of his son Isaac. Exodus chapter 20 records divine instructions for making altars of earth and of unhewn stone. Unhewn because the use of tools on the stone would profane it. Altars of bronze and gold and their equipment made by Solomon for the temple in Jerusalem are described in 2 Chronicles chapter 4. A notable feature of these altars were the horns, which projected at the corners. They appear on a stone altar found at Megiddo, but their origin and significance are uncertain. Exodus chapter 21 implies that the altar of God was a place of refuge for criminals. The Gospel of Matthew chapter 23 indicates that in the 1st century AD, Jews were accustomed to swear by the altar of the Jerusalem temple. Altars for public and family worship abounded in the ancient civilizations of Greece and Rome. The Greeks distinguished between two kinds of altars. The bomos was used for sacrifices to the Olympian gods, the essence of the victim ascending in the smoke of its burning, again liking the fragrance of burning flesh. A bit of a parallel there across civilizations, is it not? The Escara, half, served for the cults of divine heroes and chthonic underground deities. This was a low structure, but often the sacrifice was performed over a pit, so that the victim's blood descended into the earth. In the Greek temple, the image of the deity, not the altar, was the focus of attention. Altars varied in kind and form. On the Athenian Acropolis, the great altar of the goddess Athene was an outcrop of natural rock, and at Delphi, Apollo's altar was reported to be made on the bones of sacrificed victims. Public altars were sometimes of immense size. That of Zeus at Pergamon in Asia Minor was 40 feet high. In both Greece and Italy, small altars were set up in homes and marketplaces, at graves, groves, and springs. Offerings included fruit, flowers and libations of wine. Shapes varied, and the Romans often favoured cylindrical altars. The altars of Hestia in Athens and Vesta in Rome, where a perpetual fire burned, were essentially the hearths of these cities. Roman tombs frequently took the form of altars dedicated to the cult of the dead. In ancient Persia, the cult of fire, later associated with Zoroastrianism, stemmed from that reverence for fire which characterized Aryan religion and had its Indian counterpart in the worship of Agni, the Vedic god of fire. Persian fire altars comprised a massive base surmounted by a stone slab on which stood the fire container. This fire cult has been preserved by the Parsis, whose altars follow the ancient pattern. The Sanskrit word for altar, avadi, originally denoted a trench in which the sacrificial fire burned, and was closely associated with the domestic hearth in ancient India. Early Hindu literature describes other vadis of different shapes for various kinds of offerings. Great importance was attached to the shape, and special Sanskrit manuals deal in great detail with the matter. Brick altars were constructed in the form of a falcon, heron, or tortoise. A Hindu text, the Satapatha Brahmana, compares the shape of an altar with that of a woman. In modern Hinduism, altars are simpler affairs, a square-shaped structure of earth or clay on which a fire is kindled for offerings of butter, more likely ghee, and like purified butter in India. Right, here is, I'll show you the photos before I continue with this entry. The altar on which Christ's sacrifice was enacted became the focal point of Christian worship, Gothic altarpiece. Beautifully painted and decorated. And above, Zoroastrian fire altar at Naqsh Rustam, near the site of Persepolis, Iran, and below, Nigerian chieftain's bronze altar of the hand, symbolizing the power of the hand, to be placed on a mud altar during religious ceremonies. British Museum. So there's the Zoroastrian fire altar and the Nigerian, what was it? Altar of the hand. If you look close, you can see holding what looks like shepherd's crooks or Egyptian ankhs actually, and maybe there's little animals at their feet on top of that, and then around it, what do we have there? People of some kind. Holding staffs and weaponry of some kind too. Looks like shields and interesting. Right, we continue reading. The altar of heaven. Altars were essential to the religions of China. There were two kinds: those used in the public worship of the cosmic powers, and those required for the ancestor cult. The most impressive of Chinese altars is the altar of heaven in Peking, at which the Emperor of China, the Sun, S-O-N, Son of Heaven, offered sacrifice, the most crucial occasion being at the winter solstice. Japan provides a unique example of an altar, or rather of an ideal altar. The Shinto sect of Tenrikyo reverence the spot in Tamba-ichi at the center of the world and the place where creation culminated. There an unfinished altar is located, which will achieve completion when the teaching of the sect has been preached in all lands and universal brotherhood established in the service of God. Apart from this, Japanese altars have only a practical significance as tables of offerings or incense in Shinto and Buddhist shrines. In Aztec religion, the altar was adapted to the slaughter of human victims. The altar in the great temple of, I can't pronounce it, Huitzilopochtli, god of war, in Mexico City, was a block of green stone 5 feet in length and 3 feet in height and width. Its convex top was so fashioned as to present the breast of the victim to the stone knife of the sacrificing priest, who cut out the heart and presented it to the deity. The Christian altar from earliest times has been essentially associated with the celebration of the Lord's Supper or Mass. In the early church, the rite was doubtless celebrated on wooden tables, but the custom of celebrating it on the tombs of martyrs led to the tradition that stone was the proper material for altars. According to Roman Catholic practice today, even where the structure is mainly of wood, a stone mensa, table, must be inserted. In Catholic Christianity, both in the Eastern and Western churches, the status of the Mass or Eucharist as the supreme act of public worship has made the altar the focal point of church and cathedral. The development of the doctrine of the sacrifice of the Mass invested the altar with a sacrificial significance. At each Mass, the original sacrifice of Christ is represented. The doctrine of transubstantiation, that the bread and wine become the body and blood of Christ, and the custom of keeping the consecrated sacrament in a receptacle on the altar, encouraged the idea of the altar as a throne or local abode of Christ. Reaction against medieval abuses of the Mass was one of the causes of the Reformation, and it led to the abolition of altars in most Protestant churches. The placing of a cross and candles on altars dates from the 10th century. The location of the high altar is usually at the eastern end, but in some modern churches it is placed in the centre of the church. SGF Brandon. Let me just see. We'll continue with one more entry, possibly two more. See how I feel. I'm quite tired, people of Earth. I think one more will be enough. We're up to Amazons, which is why I decided to continue, because Mama T's quite enamored of the Amazon tradition, you understand. Not that I ever was one. Well, I don't know, do I? Don't remember the veil of forgetfulness. But it was something I always found particularly fascinating and attractive in childhood, having been disempowered and abused from an early age. So below we have a picture of the Amazons, who were legendary women warriors descended from Ares, the god of war. And I'm indeed an Aries, born under the Aries sign, so there are lots of little synchronicities in there. So perhaps I was an Amazonian warrior woman in ancient history. One can never be certain of anything. I don't actually believe all that much in past life regression. I think most of it's a lot of majority made up stories, but it's possible. It's possible. From a silver panel in the British Museum, made in silver, but clearly they've done the headdresses and the names of the horses and the tails in copper as well. Beautiful piece of artwork, if you ask me. Not that anyone's asking me, but as a silversmith I can appreciate the work that went into that. Absolutely beautiful. On the fringes of the classical world lived a mythical race of warrior women who had declared war on men and relegated them to slavery. The memory of their fierceness and bravery cast a potent spell on the Greek imagination. The Amazons were a mythical race of warrior women whose battles with a number of Greek heroes were recorded in various local legends. Their original home was in the gorges and forests of the Thermodon Valley in Pontus in Asia Minor, and their capital city was Themyscira on the coast of the Euxine, modern Term, on the Black Sea coast of Turkey. Termi. According to one tradition, men were excluded altogether from their country, but for purposes of propagating the race, the Amazons made an annual visit to the Gargarenes in the Caucasus. Girls born of these unions were then brought up by the Amazons, each one having her right breast either burnt, or cut off to make it easier to hurl a javelin or stretch a bow. Boys were either put to death or sent back to their fathers. Another version has it that a number of men were kept for mating purposes, but had the status of slaves, and were allowed to perform only those tasks executed in other countries by women. Legend has it that the legs and arms of these men were mutilated to prevent their challenging the Amazons' power. Whether men were or were not included in the Amazon state, only women bore arms, not only defending their own country, but making expeditions of conquest into neighbouring territories. They fought both on foot and on horseback, carrying crescent shields and wielding spears, bows and battle axes. Their life consisted mainly in hunting and warlike exercises and the training of the girl Amazons. They were ruled by a queen, and they worshipped Ares, the god of war, from whom they were believed to be descended, and Artemis, goddess of the hunt. Stories about the Amazons belong to the earliest Greek sagas. Homer mentions them in a way which shows that they were familiar to his audience. When in historical times the Greeks got to know the Thermodon region and found no Amazons there, they supposed either that Hercules had destroyed them all, or that they had been driven away. Thus in later legends, the Amazons were moved further and further away from their original homeland, but they were always located on the fringe of the world as it was then known to the Greeks. They were said to be of Scythian origin from cultures south of the Caucasus, and there was also supposed to be a race of Amazons in Africa. They were, in any case, always foreign to the Greek homeland, and in Greek eyes, like all foreigners, they counted as barbarians. Hercules, Theseus, and the Amazons. Two of their queens, Hippolyta and Penthesilea, figure in widely told Greek myths. The ninth labour imposed on Hercules by his master Eurystheus was to take from Hippolyta her girdle, symbol of her royal power, which had been given to her by the god Ares. According to one version of the myth, Hercules withstood a cavalry charge of Amazons single-handed and routed their whole army, killing Hippolyta at the same time. Later legends linked the name of Theseus, mythical king of Athens, with Hercules' expedition against the Amazons. Theseus carried off Antiope, whose sister Oreithyia, sworn to vengeance, led an invading army into Attica. The Amazons were defeated by the Athenians after 4 months fighting. Some say that Antiope was killed in the fighting, but others that she survived to make a scene at Theseus' wedding, she being the mother of Theseus' son, Hippolytus, though not his lawful wife, where she threatened to murder all the guests. Theseus killed her to prevent her carrying out her threat. In another legend, Hippolyta brought yet another Amazon force against Theseus after this wedding, and in the ensuing battle was killed accidentally by her sister Penthesilea. Pursued by the furies of her dead sister, Penthesilea sought refuge in Troy, where she obtained purification from her blood guilt at the hands of the aged King Priam. In gratitude, she enrolled in the Trojan army, where, as the war god Ares' daughter, she fought bravely until Achilles killed her. Achilles then wept for the lost beauty, youth, and courage of the dead queen and made love to her corpse. Thersites, reputed to be the ugliest Greek at Troy, jeered at Achilles' grief and accused him of unnatural lust, whereupon Achilles killed him. This enraged some of the Greeks, and Diomedes, a cousin of Thersites, threw Penthesilea's corpse into the river Scamander. The Greeks continued to circulate stories about the Amazons down to a late period. One very popular story was that the Amazon queen Thalestris visited Alexander the Great, 356 to 323 BC, during one of his Asian campaigns, wishing to have a daughter by such a famous general. She stayed with him for 13 days before returning to her own country. Writing more than 400 years later, Plutarch lists no less than 14 authorities who mention this tale, though nine of them, he says, dismissed it as complete fiction, and it was laughed at after Alexander's death by his successor in Thrace, Lysimachus. Potato. Unless you're Greek and then it's Greek to them, and I've offended everyone on this channel, but, well, you know, I try to trip my tongue around it occasionally. Lysimachus. Anyway, slave girls or matriarchs. The Amazons were a favourite subject for Greek sculptors and painters. In art of the earliest periods, they are dressed exactly like Greek warriors, but usually with one breast bare. After the Persian Wars, 499 to 448 BC, for example, on Greek vases of the great classical period, they are represented in Oriental garb, wearing caps and trousers, and pictures of them relate more and more to known legends about them. They are never depicted as having lost one breast, in spite of the Greek belief that their name meant breastless. Various explanations of the origins of the legends about the Amazons have been put forward. Some writers trace them to the armed slave girls who were dedicated to the service of certain Asian deities, and the association of the Amazons with Artemis supports this theory. But the story is more likely to be an imaginative Greek embroidery of reports about matriarchal tribes in Southwest Asia, or of tribes in which the women led a freer and tougher life than they did in Greece. Certainly, the persistence of the legend right up to the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD and its perennial popularity as a theme in the arts show that it had a deep appeal to some area in ancient Greek fantasy. See also Hercules and or Theseus. Amazons in the Old World. We are told namely that there was once in the western parts of Libya, on the bounds of the inhabited world, a race which was ruled by women and followed a manner of life unlike that which prevails among us. For it was the custom among them that the women should practice the arts of war, and be required to serve in the army for a fixed period, during which time they maintained their virginity. Then, when the years of their service in the field had expired, they went in to the men for the procreation of children. But they kept in their hands the administration of the magistracies and of all the affairs of state. The men, however, like our married women, spent their days about the house, carrying out the orders which were given them by their wives, and they took no part in military campaigns or in the exercise of free citizenship in the affairs of the community, by virtue of which they might become presumptuous and rise up against the women. When their children were born, the babies were turned over to the men, who brought them up on milk and such cooked goods as were appropriate to the age of the infants. Diodorus Siculus, Bibliotheca Historica. Amazons in the New World. Sir Walter Raleigh, the famous Elizabethan adventurer, explored South America in the 16th century and was told of Amazons. But they which are not far from Guyana do meet with men but once in a year. At that time all the kings of the borders assemble, and the queens of the Amazons, and after the queens have chosen, the rest cast lots for their valentines. I'd get the short stick, that's for sure, babies. Never mind. I mean, at least I can make jokes about it. It's all I've got left is my tumescent sense of humour. It's not a tumour, but it feels like one sometimes. Oh, well, one day that bubble might burst and let all the pus and bitterness and sorrow and grief and fucking ghastly horror and might even heal and invite a wonderful man into my life who genuinely loves me. Ah, sweetest fairy stories invented ever yet by the Tanya. You just gotta wiggle, 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 wiggle and do the mosh, babies. Right. This 1 month they feast, dance, and drink of their wines in abundance, and the moon being done, they all depart to their own provinces. If they give birth to a son, they return him to the father. If a daughter, they nourish it and retain it. It was further told me that if in the wars they took any prisoners, that they used to accompany with those also at what time soever, but in the end for certain they put them to death, for they are said to be very cruel and bloodthirsty, especially to such as offer to invade their territories. Sir Walter Raleigh, The Discovery of the Empire of Guyana. And I'll read one more and then we'll finish for the night, for the evening. My beautiful earthlings, fellow inhabitants, all sentient beings on planet Earth. The Japanese Buddhist deity Amida, I said it the Hebrew way, I couldn't help myself, sorry. Amida offers entry into heaven to all his followers. In return for the faithful repetition of a short prayer, I adore thee, O Lord of boundless light. What's not to love boundless light? It's interesting that in Judaism we have a similar, well, not the same prayer, but we have a special prayer called the Amida as well, where you stand to attention, take 3 steps forwards and 3 steps back, and then ground and return to centre and pray. Anyway, I'm sure it's a different thing, but just reminded me of that, people of Earth. Amida. The word Amida originally denoted merely an abstraction, the ideal of unlimited light. But this abstraction, like others in Buddhism, came slowly to be personalized, first as a mere bodhisattva, one assiduously undergoing the disciplines necessary to become a Buddha, and then as an actual Buddha. Amida had 48 wishes, one of which was to let the dead pass into Jodo, or the pure land of the afterlife in which he would reign, and another that if any single mortal who had offered prayers to him failed to obtain salvation, then he, Amida, would never be a Buddha. These wishes were fulfilled, with the result that anyone with sufficient faith in Amida was assured of a place in Jodo. The formulation of this doctrine of Amida as a personage rather than an abstract concept dates back to India in the 2nd century BC, but it was in Japan that it found its most enthusiastic devotees, who eventually formed the Jodo, Pure Land, and other similar sects. Perhaps the first Japanese individual to be granted a vision of Jodo was the student priest Genshin, 942 to 1017, who retreated to Mount Hiei, Hiei, near the old Japanese capital of Kyoto, in order to live in solitary meditation, aloof from the luxury and depravity of his city. His most famous work, Ocho Yoshu, is usually quoted as the source of Japanese Amida worship. Certainly it contributed greatly to the foundation of the Jodo sect and had a profound effect on later literature and art. Genshin maintained that, for most people, the Nembutsu, or repetition of the phrase Namo Amida Butsu, I adore thee, O Lord of boundless light, could, without any other aids, ensure entry into the heaven that awaited the soul after death. The actual founder of the Jodo sect was not Genshin but Honen, 1130 to 12. After studying at a monastery on Mount Hiei or Hiei or Eiio, no, I don't mean any disrespect. I'm going to find out how to pronounce that. It's driving me mad, people of Earth. I can't stand being ignorant. Mount Hiei. I need to know how to pronounce it, and it doesn't say. Pronunciation, maybe it will tell me.
I got real life insurance to protect us financially. You can choose.
Bear with the irritating Google ads. Dear Goddess.
You are looking at Julian's pronunciation guide, where we look at how to pronounce better some of the most mispronounced words in the world, like this other curious word.
Hurry up.
How do you say what you're looking for today? Name pronunciation. From Japanese for more names from manga series and anime. Make sure to stay tuned. Hiei is how it's pronounced in Japanese.
Hiei. Hiei. Okay. Well, now we all know. And Mama T doesn't feel quite so stupid, because that was driving me a bit bonkers, to be honest. As far as losing my cool. Right. After studying at a monastery on Mount Hiei and finding no satisfaction there, he formulated a doctrine based on a remark of Zendo Daishi, a Buddhist priest of an earlier epoch, to the effect that man's salvation does not depend so much on his own strength as upon the grace of Amida. Honen thought that men should not trouble themselves about whether their hearts were good or bad, or their sins light or heavy, but should only believe that they would be born into the pure land and repeat the invocation, Namo Amida Butsu, with total conviction. To people of small intellectual capacity and little education, it was natural that a form of Buddhism that required merely a simple act of faith, accompanied by a single phrase, should have a strong and instantaneous appeal. To people who lived precariously, decimated by wars, famines, and plagues, to be able to look forward not to the annihilation of self in the Buddhist nirvana, but to existence in a paradise far from this world of trouble, was a most potent source of consolation. Here, beyond the grave, was Amida offering something unobtainable in mortal life, an existence devoid of pain, sadness, hunger, or anxiety. I'll show you the picture below. Amida is the paradise to which those who believe in him are sure of entry. The gleaming spot on his forehead symbolizes wisdom, and his forehead is encircled by a halo. Amida of the Phoenix Hall. In Buddhist art, Amida may generally be recognized by the hands lying in his lap, with the thumbs placed end to end. Very often the halo, in Japanese gokko, forms a background not only to the head but to the entire body. There is a gleaming spot on the forehead, emblematic of wisdom. The two images waiting on either side of Amida are Kanon, goddess of mercy, and Seishi, lord of might. Probably the most beautiful sculptured representation of Amida is in the Phoenix Hall, part of the Byodo-in temple in the suburbs of Kyoto. Carved in the 11th century, this Amida rests in a building that indeed resembles the phoenix from which it takes its name. So lightly does it appear to hover over the water that surrounds it. This, the weary, harassed and despairing believers of that time must have thought, was indeed the Lord Amida himself, sitting there in repose, his eyes lowered as he compassionately promised salvation to all who believed in him. This offer of a future life of bliss is not dissimilar to that offered by depictions of Christ on the cross, and the self-sacrifice of Amida, renouncing the possibility of becoming a Buddha unless all believers can join him in paradise, is not dissimilar to that of the Christian Saviour. All for one and one for all, am I right? Seems fair on the surface of things. What can go wrong, am I right? Oh, that's just me being a bit facetious. May the gods forgive me for my occasional cynicism. In most religions, there is a conflict between the belief in salvation through works, the idea that it is a man's good actions which bring him to heaven, and the belief in salvation through faith. Those who accept the doctrine of rebirth in a paradise over which Amida presides, and who believe that rebirth can be achieved merely by the repetition and faithful submission of a single invocation, maintain that all men are possessors of a Buddha nature, and that, to make an intellectual or spiritual effort at self-improvement is illogical, since by doing so, one denies that one is already Buddha, and it is only by accepting one's Buddha nature that Buddhahood can be won. The paradox there. Others, perhaps more self-exacting, deplore the way in which the Jodo and similar sects have turned what was at first no more than an abstraction into an actual personage. But if Buddhism was to be made accessible to the ordinary people of Japan, it was perhaps inevitable that the abstract should be made concrete, the unreal real, so that by seeing the walls of their temples covered with hosts of greater and lesser deities, they should be able to embrace a faith made personal enough to grasp. The promise of a future life may in part explain Japanese willingness to seek out death, even by suicide. Written by Francis King. See also Japan. Further reading: D.T. Suzuki, Zen and Japanese Buddhism, E. Konzi, Buddhism, Its Essence and Development, Sir C. Eliot, Japanese Buddhism, E. Dale Saunders, Buddhism in Japan. Right, we're going to stop there, my darlings, my sweet ones, my angels, my babies, my fellow earthlings, my wonderful ones. I'm getting dizzy and tired. And I've got fumes coming, and it's stainless steel, the table, but I'm worried about the birds. I'm actually going to, when I finish saying goodbye to you, I'm going to check on the birds. I kept the windows open. There's a strong aroma. I don't know where it's coming from. I took the plastic off and chucked it outside, and there's a strange, sickly, sweet aroma. I can't think what it would be. So it's stainless steel. It shouldn't be giving off. It shouldn't be off-gassing, is what I'm saying. So it's odd. Anyway, I bid you good evening, wherever you are. You can hear the wheeze I've got from it. So that's why I'm worried about my birds. I bid you good evening, wherever you are in the space-time continuum. Have a beautiful day, people of Earth. And I'll be back very likely tomorrow or the next day to continue reading. We're about, how many pages are we up to? We're about halfway through now. Pages. Just under halfway. So, or just over halfway rather. So, blessed be, Shabbat Shalom, have a wonderful evening. I'm not going dancing tonight, I'm exhausted, and my cold is better, but I want to give myself a few more days to recover. We'll see how I feel. Maybe tomorrow night or next week. It's not the end of the world if I miss a week. I missed out on 6 weeks, did I not? So I didn't shrivel up and die, and there's life on the other side of the club scene, but I must admit it is more fun to be dancing with other revellers around you and have live music and a few little drinky poos in a public venue. It's more salubrious. And you can't keep an old girl down. Good night, Lila Tov. If I can get my mouse to work, it's not wanting to work. Right, here we are. Speak to you soon.